boys. Let's go. Okay, a number line shows the relationship between numbers, and you compare two numbers by using the symbols less than, greater than, or equal to. So for example, 7 is greater than 2. 3 is less than 8. 5 equals 5. So we can compare two numbers using those symbols. We're going to be working with statements, expressions, and we're going to be using the symbols greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. So I'm going to talk about the graphing part of this, even though we're not going to be graphing today. We're not going to graph until the next lesson, but we'll talk about it now. So when we're graphing on a number line, it's important, two things are very important. One is where the boundary of the expression begins and which direction it goes in, okay? So when I'm graphing x is greater than 2, knowing that each of my hash marks is a 1, greater than 2 would be an open circle on 2, going to the right. Now we begin on 2 because it's greater than 2, and greater than 2 is, 2.0000001, and we can't identify that point on a number line, which is why we put a circle on the 2. We leave it open to indicate that 2 is not included, but it begins at 2. Anything greater than 2. The line and the arrow go towards the right. You'll notice that the line and the arrow go in the same direction as the inequality symbol is pointing. That is only the case if x is on the left side. Okay, somebody will miss this. They'll have x on the right and they'll still do their line in the direction of the arrow. Okay, so it's important to know that if you're using this symbol as a way of knowing which way to draw the line and the arrow, that the x has to be on the left for that to happen. Okay, so with that symbol, a greater than or a less than is going to have an open circle to indicate once again that this is my boundary, but this number is not included. Less than or equal to -3 is going to be a colored in circle, closed circle, going, in this case, to the left. So again, my boundary is -3. This time I'm including -3. It's less than or equal to -3. I close in the circle, and again, my inequality symbol points to the left, and it does go to the left, okay? Making sure you know how to read an inequality symbol is going to be important. So when I have a greater than or equal to, or a less than or equal to, that's when I'm going to have a closed-in circle. That concept of those circles will carry through to several, at least 7 lessons, at least 5 lessons, I think, okay? That concept of open and closed circles. Now, again, we're not going to graph today, but you're going to see some graphing things on your assignment, okay? All right, solving inequalities is just like solving equations. The solving part should not be a challenge. You should have solved inequalities at some point. We've solved equations all year, so these are just like solving an equation. Same rules, distributive property, get rid of fractions, x on one side, etc. Except there's one exception. If you multiply by or divide by a negative number, you must switch the direction of the inequality symbol. So if you multiply by or divide by a negative number, you switch the direction of the inequality symbol. In most cases, almost all cases, it's a divide by. I am going to do a multiply by just so you see it, but usually it's always a divide by, okay? We switch the direction of the inequality symbol. Now, something new to what you've done with inequalities before. We're going to be leaving our answers in interval notation as opposed to set notation, okay? So this is a description about it. I'm going to talk about it, but then it's easier to see when I actually do it, okay? When we're using interval notation, parentheses on either side indicate that this is the boundary, but that number is not included. So it's kind of like having the open circle on your graph. Brackets on either side indicate that this is the boundary and that the number is included, okay? That would be like our closed circle. Infinity, the symbol infinity, indicates that the answer goes infinitely in the positive direction, and negative infinity indicates that the answer goes infinitely in the negative direction, okay? So as we go through this, ask your questions, but I'll do some clearing up at the end and make sure I answer questions, okay? As I said, it's easier shown to you than like just reading that. All right, I'm solving. So I'm going to add 9 to both sides. So x is greater than 21. Normally, that's set notation. That's how we've left our answers in the past. This is not how we're going to leave them now. So x is greater than 21, which means I'm starting at 21, and I'm going to go infinitely to the positive direction, to the positive numbers, greater than 21. So I'm not including 21. So my answer looks like this. It's kind of like an ordered pair written thing. It's 2 things with a comma between them. You're going to have parentheses or brackets. So this is saying that my graph begins at 21 and it goes to positive infinity. I do not include 21 because it's only greater than 21. Thus, the parentheses, okay? Let me get through the first 4 examples and you'll see the differences, okay? On this next one, I'm going to multiply by -3. So I'm going to have -51 is greater than x. So here I multiplied by a negative. Rarely do we do that, rarely. Because I multiplied by a negative, I did have to switch the direction of the inequality symbol. So it went from a less than to a greater than. Now, I will just say from experience that when x is on the right, people tend to make more mistakes. So if it is helpful to you to switch this around, if not necessary, then don't. Okay, so it looks like I changed it, but I didn't. It's still pointing at the x, pointing at the x. So my answer, x is less than -51. So that means because it's less than, that I'm going infinitely in the negative direction. So I'm going to be starting at 51 and going infinitely in the negative direction. So my answer is going to look like that. -infinity to -51. So -51 is the biggest number. I don't include it because it's just less than, but then it's going to go infinitely in the negative direction, thus the negative infinity. Okay, on this next one, I'm going to subtract 5. So 3x is greater than or equal to 12. Divide by 3, and x is greater than or equal to 4. So here I'm beginning at 4, going infinitely in the positive direction, greater than 4. 4 will be included, so I use a bracket. But I'm going to go to positive infinity because it's greater than 4. So it's saying I'm beginning at 4. My bracket here means that I'm including 4, and then I'm going to keep going greater than 4 in the positive infinity direction. On this next one, I'm going to multiply everything by 3 to get rid of my fraction. And I'm going to have 3's cancel there. X minus 6 is less than or equal to 15. And then add 6, x is less than or equal to 21. So here I'm going in the negative direction, less than 21. 21 is the biggest it can be. So I'm going to go in the negative infinity direction up to 21, including 21. So less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, I'm going to have a bracket. Okay, so let me make a few general statements. If you have a greater than or equal to, okay, and x is on the left, so this is all statements where x is on the left side, okay? If you have a greater than or equal to, you're always going to have a positive infinity in your answer. Positive infinity can only be on the right side because the answer represents your smallest number to your greatest number. So infinity can only be on the right side of the answer. Okay? If you have less than or equal to, you're going to have a negative infinity in your answer. Negative infinity can only be on the left side of the answer because it's the smallest number. Okay? When you have greater than or less, something else about infinities. Infinities always have parentheses, never brackets. Okay. If you have greater than or less than, you'll notice that that is when I'm using parentheses on my number. And if I have greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, that's when I'm using a bracket on my number. So brackets indicate that the number is included. Parentheses indicate that this is just my boundary, the number's not included. Okay. Okay, some questions so far about that interval notation. Okay, I'm going to keep solving here. All right, on this next one, I'm going to subtract 12. So I'm going to have negative 5x is less than 10. I'm going to divide by, ding, 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 I'm dividing by negative 5. So since I'm dividing by a negative, I switched the direction of the inequality symbol. X is greater than negative 2. So greater than negative 2, greater than means I'm going to be going to positive infinity. And I'm going to start at negative 2. Negative 2 is not included, parentheses. And again, infinities always have parentheses, never brackets. On this next one, I'm distributing. So 12 minus 6x is less than or equal to 3x minus 6. Subtract your 3x. So 12 minus 9x is less than or equal to negative 6. Subtract 12. Negative 9x is less than or equal to negative 18. Divide by negative 9, ding, ding, ding. Switch the direction of that symbol. X is greater than or equal to positive 2. So I'm beginning at positive 2, going to the right, which means positive infinity. So bracket 2 to infinity. Make sure you're really careful about your parentheses in your bracket. If I can't tell, I would mark it wrong. Okay, this next one's going to be a special case here. So I'm going to distribute first. X plus 5 is less than 7x, and then I distribute minus 6x plus 6. Collect your x's on the right. X plus 5 is less than x plus 6. My x's cancel each other out, and I get the statement 5 is less than 6. So in our solving, 5 is less than 6 is a true statement. Since it's a true statement, it means my answer would be all real numbers. But since we're using interval notation, we don't write all real numbers, that's set notation. We would write this as negative infinity to positive infinity. So same as all real numbers, but we don't write it as all real numbers. Change that to a better R. If you got a false statement, 5 was greater than 6, then no solution is still just a circle with the line through it. So there's no special symbol in set notation or in interval notation for no solution. Okay? All right, on this next one, I'm going to multiply by 8 to get rid of my fractions. And I have my 8's cancel. 7x plus 4 times 8, 32, greater than or equal to 2 cancels into 8 4 times. 1 times 4 is 4. Subtract your 32, and 7x is greater than a negative 28, and divide by 7. I purposely wanted you to see an example like this because sometimes people switch this inequality symbol because they see this negative 28. But what I'm dividing by is positive 7. So it's got to be the number with the x, the number that you're dividing by, not the number you're dividing into, okay? So no switch there. So x is greater than or equal to negative 4 would be a bracket beginning at negative 4 up to positive infinity. Again, greater than or equal to's are going to have positive infinity. Less than or equal to are going to have negative infinities. Negative infinity can only be on the left side. Positive infinity can only be on the right side. Okay, and then in this last one, common denominator is 4. So I'm going to take each term by 4. And I get x times 4 is 4x. The 4's cancel on this next term, and I'm just left with 3. Greater than 2 cancels, it goes into 4 twice, leaving on the outside 2 times 1. You can distribute at that point. I'll just do it as an extra step. So now I distribute and I get 2x plus 2. Subtract 2x. So 4 minus 2 is 2. Plus 3 greater than 2. Subtract 3, 2x is greater than negative 1. And divide by 2, and x is greater than negative half. Greater means it's going to positive infinity. Negative 1/2 is where we start. We do not include it. So we do have parentheses. Okay, so let me repeat a couple things. Negative infinity can only be on the left. Positive infinity can only be on the right. Infinities always have parentheses, never a bracket. If you have greater than or less than, that's when you're using parentheses on your number. Greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, that's when you're using brackets on your numbers. All real numbers is negative infinity to positive infinity, no solution, still circle with the line through it, no solution, okay? Okay, anything that you need to ask me to clear up there?